So thanks everybody for coming to the Memoir and Autobio Comics panel. I'm Andy Kunka, moderating this panel. I've written a book about autobiographical comics. We have up here and a recently published book about Howard Cruse called Life and Comics of Howard Cruse, Taking Risks in the Service of Truth, which was nominated for an Eisner Award. And thanks. So I want to go. You're not here to see me, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel. So to my left here is Kayla E, is an award-winning artist, cartoonist, and designer of Mexican-American descent. She works as a creative director at Fantagraphics and is principal at Design Alter. She is also the co-founder and president of Nat Brute Inc., a nonprofit that produces an art and literary magazine, of which she is editor-in-chief. She earned her BA in Visual and Environmental Studies from Harvard, where she served as the art director for the Harvard Lampoon and was awarded the Albert Alcalay Prize in Visual Arts. As a public speaker, Kayla has been invited to expand on her practice at major universities and creative conferences across the country. Precious Rubbish, her experimental graphic memoir, will be published by Fantagraphics in 2024, and I would add, is going to change the world when it comes out. It's fantastic, and we'll look at some of it today. Kayla works out of her downtown attic studio in rural North Carolina, where she lives down the road with her wife, writer Laura Bullard. And then next we have Ann Haddox. Ann Haddox is a queer comics, textile, and ceramics artist living in Detroit. Their art focuses on gender, place, and reclaiming craft as art. They have been making zines since their time at Oberlin College, where their honors thesis was a zine of short comics about gender and identity. Ann's recent projects include Squirt, a queer erotica anthology, and a risograph-printed speculative nonfiction comic, Crush. In their free time, they draw the ice cream trucks that visit their neighborhood and tend to the garden. You have cards with the ice cream trucks on them, right?
Yes.
And next is Sam Szabo, a cartoonist from the North Shore of Massachusetts, currently based in Chicago. Sam has been self-publishing comics and zines for over a decade, with a primary focus on memoir. Her current series include Girl Hell, Momics, and Comics Will Break Your Balls. Sam's first book, Enlightened Transsexual Comics, will be published by Silver Sprocket in 2023. And yay. And last, we have MS Harkness, born in Kearney, Oklahoma in the early 90s, though her work is an autobiographical reflection of audacious young adulthood in the Midwest. Harkness's long and short form comics are played as a true rendition of various tragedies and comedies, usually involving sex, drugs, dating, and various memories from a difficult childhood. Her work has been published by Uncivilized Books, Fantagraphics, and The New Yorker, and she has been a recipient of the Minnesota State Arts Board's Visual Artist Grant. So welcome our panel. So I just want to kind of, start with the most basic question, which is why do memoir and autobio comics? You can start with Kayla.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Kayla. So I think I think about this question a lot. I get asked this question a lot. And something just happened to me that pretty much sums up why I make autobio and memoir comics. I just got back from the bathroom where I had to clean up my face because I was sobbing at my table. This woman came back from her home to talk to me because her husband came and picked up my comics yesterday, and I always have my spiel, I'm Kayla E, this is Precious Rubbish, comics about my traumatic childhood, and usually, I get like a chuckle or something, and every once in a while, fellow survivors will disclose to me, and he did, and I told him that I'm sorry for what happened to him, and I told him I'm really glad that we both survived, and he left, and he told his wife, and his wife came back to tell me that her husband cried for one of the first times in 22 years, and that he's seems like he might be looking to start processing some of his trauma. And that is why I make Autobio comics. The actual process of making my comics is torture. It is so painful. It's so triggering. It doesn't feel good. Drawing is hard. All of it's hard. But I do it in the hope that a person I don't know will read my work and be mirrored. And that heals me, and I hope it heals other people. But my stuff is really dark. It's really hard to read, and it's really hard to write. But I'm hoping that it's like a net plus in the world and not adding more pain. So that, yeah.
Thanks, Kayla. I presented with you before. I should, from now on, bring tissues. When
For me.
No, for everybody. But thank you. That was a wonderful answer. And Anne, can you talk about it?
Yeah. For me, I think a lot of artists would talk about sort of like a compulsion to create. And that's what I'm working with. Why Autobio specifically? It's all this material that's already there. I don't have to come up with a fiction storyline. So perhaps that's like a little bit of the lazy reason why. But I think also, yeah, processing past experiences is definitely part of it, especially with my thesis gender comic. There was a lot of processing happening on the page there. Yeah, I'll say that for now.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if I was trying to justify the existence of my work, I think there's a lot to be said for queer memoir. That stuff was really helpful for me a few years ago when I was sort of coming into an understanding of myself. I think if you have an experience that is not part of the kind of mainstream, widely circulated art, seeing memoir from people who have had similar experiences to you is really important. I know that was the case for me, and when I hear that my work has done that for others, that's super validating. But at the same time, I was making Autobio way before I understood myself to be queer. And I think a lot of us are kind of driven by psychological compulsion, kind of what Ed was getting at just now. I just feel like I need to write down everything that happens to me. Part of it is, I think, having a record of your life kind of staves off that fear of your own mortality a little bit. And it's also a way to process memories, to get some distance from them, to sort of try to impose some meaning on memories that might be kind of chaotic or confusing or upsetting. Yeah, for me, it's a very therapeutic thing, and I feel like I'd be doing it even if no one was reading it. Yeah. Okay.
Just a quick follow-up,
Yeah.
Sam. What were some of the books that you read or works that you read that were helpful to you as you were kind of processing these things?
Oh, man.
The memoirs you mentioned.
I mean, honestly, yeah, totally, Lee Mars. I mean, Howard Cruse. I mean, I guess the work of Howard is not strictly autobiographical, but I've Stuck Rubber Baby was very drawn from personal experience, and I really related to that kind of slow tentative journey out of the closet from oh, these people are really cool, oh, I just really like queer people, oh, hey, maybe I'm a little gay. But yeah, those sort of sort of furtive, ambiguous kind of memoirs really helped me when I was in sort of an awkward stage of figuring things out. Oh, I don't know. Who else was a big influence? I mean, Alison Bechdel was a humongous influence on me. Both her memoir work and Dykes to Watch Out For.
It seems like it's been a common theme through a lot of panels I've seen. It's just how important representation is, and how many cartoonists themselves get inspired to do their own stuff from seeing people like them, with experiences like them.
Yeah, totally.
So that's great. Okay, so MS, go ahead. Why Autobio?
I'm a narcissist.
Yeah.
I mean, I came up with a pretty contemporary route to comics in that I went to a private art institution, and a lot of that is finding out what sticks and what hits in a kind of critique setting with your peers. And if you have a weird life where a lot of your early 20s are like oversharing things that, you know, other people have varying reactions to, and then you do that in your work, like the way that I talk and tell stories works better when I'm not there. And then there's not that expectation of like another person having to like react in a certain way because there's another person there, or like feel bad for you or something like that. So that the initial mini comics I made really resonated with my peers, and then thus put me on a track to just constantly exploit my experiences for better or for worse. So I'm now good at it, and it works. So I do it more often than not.
Great. One of the other questions I've seen come up on other panels that are talking about autobio and stuff, especially last night, is the kind of challenge of representing yourself. Like, how do you draw yourself, and what choices go into doing that? And when I was reading your stuff, seeing how much you foreground that question. So I wanted to start that question with you to see like what challenges you face, especially, and I've got some images up here. Like it seems like the version of you changes depending on the needs of the story, but also that you have comics you've done like in Momics where you actually show the different ways you've drawn yourself. So could you talk about those challenges and how that you've foregrounded that in your work?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as a trans person, the way that I look has changed quite a bit since I started making comics. If you do stuff like autobio or any form of self-portraiture, you are staring at yourself a lot, which can be kind of a fraught experience if you have any sort of body dysmorphia. But I have drawn myself a lot of different ways. I had like a very consistent way I'd worked out to draw myself that worked for about 10 years. And then a couple years into transitioning, I was like, I don't look anything like this anymore. So I went through sort of a weird kind of adolescence where I was trying out drawing myself in different ways. And I kind of have different avatars that I cycle through depending on like the tone of the comic now. I think that when you are doing autobio, you're kind of making a lot of choices with like how cartoony to make it, how detailed to make it. If you're like kind of going for pathos, I'll get some cross hatching going, and you can kind of like get into all the gruesome details of your face up close. But if I'm doing something that's like more light, or maybe something that I want more of a distance from as the narrator, I'll do something that's like very simple and cartoony, maybe just like a few lines, and then you're sort of reduced to a more two-dimensional cartoon character, which is sometimes a little less scary.
I love this. Yeah. This example is one of my favorites of yours with this, and this is in Enlightened Transsexual Comics. Yeah,
she's sort of an avatar that started. This was I was thinking of this as a self-portrait when I drew it, and then she sort of took on a life of her own. But that's definitely a character that's based on what I looked like at the time that I drew it.
that this is a representation too of the kind of three different kind of kind of gender identities you've been working through.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And Anne, I wanted to ask you the similar question, but one of the things I noticed about Crush is that you barely appear in that comic. It focuses instead on a lot of the objects and things that are a part of the narrative. And so not just talking about like how you represent yourself, but also the choice not to represent yourself in some of those scenes.
Totally. I just started a poetry workshop this past week with a very talented writer, Brittany Rogers in Detroit. And one of the first things we started talking about was interiority and which images are shown versus not shown in a poem, but I think it applies here too. And how that's really like a lot of the art of how this story is told, right? It's not just what you include, it's what you leave out. And I think with Crush specifically, I've received a lot of feedback that some of my work can be like a little bit talking heads. And so in this exercise, I was specifically pushing myself beyond that to more set the scene and go in a slightly different direction. But as far as the challenges of drawing yourself, I'm perhaps still in that adolescence period that Sam was talking about, and maybe will be forever because my hair changes like every year. So depending on when the comic was produced, I might look really different.
I just wanted to add that one thing I just thought of, like, when I make Autobio comics, I tend to like play around with chronology a lot and kind of move events or pages around to like fit the narrative a little better at the risk of like, being chronologically accurate. But I just keep growing my hair out, and that's made it like completely impossible. It like grounds everything I draw in like the day that I drew it. But it's also an interesting marker of time.
Thanks. And MS with this question too. I mean, I'm staying at Rebecca Perry Damson's house, and every morning I wake up, she's got the original art for this page, and I'm faced with this page, and so I've grown to really like love this and study this page a lot. I should have just taken a picture of what she's got on her wall.
I paid my rent on a really tough month, so shout out Rebecca.
But one of the things that struck me about both Desperate Pleasures and Tinderella is how you kind of go from this being your avatar in Desperate Pleasures to something more like this in Tinderella. Can you talk a bit about that transition in your drawing of yourself?
I was learning to draw. Was a big part of it. It's like 90% of that answer. But Frank Santoro, a highly controversial figure, told me that I should just kind of unify my form more and for what I want to do as far as like having kind of multiple notes is like a more realistic, like more Hernandez Brothers kind of like black and white authority over like a more realistic form versus like a cartoony little guy. And like tonally shifting between that, like I need to have like a more clear cut A and B. Mm-hmm. So like this book, I would trace everything like 3 times before it ever got inked, which was really good to teach me how to do what I was going to do. I don't have to do that anymore because now I'm like good enough. But yeah, like I was told to do that. So if there was ever the point where like someone wanted to give me a big check for making an animated series, some underpaid person could like do like the animations for it really easily because then I have like a very stable character for him. And yeah, I mean, it's not bad advice to do that. Like, I think it really did help my cartooning settle more. So, yeah.
Great. And Kayla, you know what? Well, one of the things I was thinking of is like there's certain autobiographical cartoonists, and like Noah Van Sciver comes to mind, that if I didn't know what he looked like, if I hadn't seen him in person, I would recognize him even though his avatar is really super simple, it's clearly him whenever you see him. And I think there's a few others like that. And what I find interesting about all of you is that is not necessarily the case. And Kayla, I think you have one of the most distinctive avatars that you use. So you could talk about coming to this particular figure for yourself.
Sure. So this iteration of Kayla, Lil Kayla, me as a child, came when I was working on my undergraduate thesis. It was called Kayla TV, and I had made this I do performance art, painting, and lot of multimedia work, but I'd made this giant head. It's a huge paper mache head, and I like dressed up in a costume of like a cartoon character version of myself. And
I've always thought about doing that.
it's
Is it fun?
no.
Damn it. Okay.
No, I would like create gifs where I'm like spanking myself. I'm like pouring alcohol down a baby version of myself. It's like really dark shit. So it probably could be fun, but the head also was infested by rats at one point. When I put it on, it hits right at my clavicle and it weighs like 30, 40 pounds and I can't breathe. So it's like, it's part of like it's like so painful to be in my body. Like when I'm embodying myself, it's like, feels like so much of what I'm talking about feels torturous. So it says a lot about me, I guess. But so I made this character that is the center of my art practice. And she's me, I guess. And I also have body dysmorphia, so I have absolutely no idea what I look like in real life. And I'm pretty much fully dissociated at all times. So I just kind of like came up with this character, and she feels like me enough. And I actually, in my comics, it's the same head again and again and again and again, thousands of times. Her face never changes. I never redraw her. I drew her once and I never draw her again. But her body changes constantly as she grows up. I am in recovery from and struggle with disordered eating. So I look different like every 4 years. I'm like a different person. It's like weird. 4 to 6 is kind of like what's going on with my timeline. So that's why I'm different heights, I'm different weights. Like sometimes I'm like Veronica style, very fashionable and trim. Other times I'm, short and stocky. I'm like me at 10 years old. It's just, it changes. And that is a direct reflection of my own complicated relationship with my body and my understanding of how I look.
So, and Sam, you write a lot about body dysmorphia too. Does that kind of resonate with you?
Oh yeah, big time. And I'm like kicking myself for not saying that on the first go round. But yeah, I also draw myself with like, in the last couple of years, there's been like a lot of kind of funhouse mirror stuff with like really big body, small head. I think I may have bit that too from Tommy Parrish, who I was like really locked into their work like early on. Because they draw these like really big shoulders and giant bodies, and I was like, "Yo, that's how my brain feels." So like a lot of my self-portraiture is like that. When I'm doing a scripted comic, I tend to like lock into a more sort of steady image of myself just for the clarity of the piece. But when I'm doing like a more rough like diary comic where I'm like not penciling or anything, I do like to kind of just like let my pen kind of give voice to the dysmorphia and like kind of just like a lot of times like just the proportions of my body parts are really out of whack because that's kind of like speaks to what's going on in my brain. But yeah, I don't know. Drawing these things out can be like very therapeutic, and it's also just like it's a hard thing to give expression to in words, So
what is there any like kind of difference in the style you're using now for the book that's coming out from Silver Sprocket that kind of stands out in terms of the choices you're making for that versus what you've done in the past?
Totally. Well, like I said, this character sort of evolved from being a self-portrait to being sort of a character with a life of her own. And throughout the book, her body changes a lot. She has 3 eyes and 3 tits. Sometimes she has more than 3 of those things at certain points. But she is sort of meant to be this sort of like fluid character who will often like kind of stretch and contort with the story, sort of depending on what's going on in the narrative. And not to spoil the book too much, but I also break the fourth wall and make an appearance as the writer of the book towards the end of the book, and there is some like interaction with that character and with me. And for me, that was like a really fun way to cross these 2 threads of Autobio, because I do have these sort of staid, like consistent comics with like panels and borders where I look the same from image to image. And then I have these like really kind of gonzo, crazy, distorted caricature versions of myself, and sort of having those two characters interact in like a really literal way was like very fun for me to draw. I don't know how it'll play to read, but yeah.
You're all doing also, as we can kind of see from this discussion, like really, really deeply personal stories. And this kind of circles back a bit to the first question a bit, but when you go into the idea of telling, especially a deeply personal story that involves other people that have been in your life, do you have concerns about those other people responding to your story? And maybe MS will start with you on that end.
Yeah, I'm concerned. Yeah, is this on? Oh, 'cause I was leaning in too much. Yeah, I do things to hide other people and consider them and try and talk to them in a way where, like, with my graphic novels at least, like, I'm giving a lot of slack in the way that I'm like presenting myself as unreliable at points and just not making my point of view like, so present as to paint somebody poorly. But yeah, I do things by drawing and or writing things specifically.
Do you like merge figures together then? And
yeah, or conversations to just kind of fit things in specific moments. So, yeah.
Thanks. Anybody else want to touch on that question at all?
Yeah, I do want to speak to this. I think my philosophy on this is mostly taken from an Anne Lamott quote. And she says, "You own everything that happened to you. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better."
That's good. Worshiping. Yes.
And so just sort of following that, I think I try to focus on my own experience of how things went, right? Like, I'm not inside anyone else's head. It's only, like, my work is not facts. It's my experience, right? And then I also think I have a fair amount of wiggle room there, because even if I'm trying to draw one particular person, I don't think I'm quite there yet that you'd be able to, like, recognize them off the street. So, yeah.
I have a lot to say about this as well, but I will keep it brief. All of my work is about my family, my biological family, my biological mother, bio dad, bio brother, and occasionally some bio grandparents appear. But I have no family. I'm fully, completely, 100% estranged from every human being I'm related to. And it is terrible. But the process has been... So I've been making comics for fucking ever, like over a decade. And most people are like, wow, I've never heard of you. I don't know your stuff. Like, that's so weird. And I'm like, well, this is my first time in my life, like, showing people my work. I had parents. I had a brother. They were in my life. They were actively in my life. And I was making the work, but they're volatile, scary people. And I was really scared if they saw. I couldn't have a career as a cartoonist. I couldn't be public with my work. It was too much of a risk. Like, I wanted my family. I wanted the word family. I wanted a human to fill that mom hole, But luckily, everyone I'm biologically related to in my immediate family are narcissists. So they don't care about my stuff. They've never looked at my work. They've never sought it out. They don't know what I do. They don't know what it looks like. They'll probably never see this book. They probably don't think about me. And I totally agree with that Anne Lamott quote. But I also don't want to be sued. So I hide my family's faces. So in every, I don't know if y'all can see, but like here, my dad's got his like tacky little golf cap and you can't see his eyes. And with my bio mom, her face is always turned like this. My brother, same thing. You never see their faces, you only see mine. You only ever see my face in all of my work. And that's a direct effort to make sure that anyone reading my work centers my child self in a way that I never actually was as a child. And yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen. We'll see, but like most likely, like it's gonna be on YouTube maybe, and like they don't care about me. So that frees me up in a lot of ways to make the stories that I need to make and to speak the truth of what happened to me, that's my only aim in doing this work.
When you mentioned your family being narcissists, that just reminded me a few years ago here I think it was at CXC, Phoebe Gleckner was here, and we were talking, and Diary of a Teenage Girl, the movie was about to come out, and I was talking to her about it, and she was talking about how excited her mother was that Kristen Wiig was playing her. I'm like, does she know? Like, how is that something to be? I mean, yes, be excited about that, I guess, but you're just not like, yeah, it's not like it's a great characterization. Yeah. So let's see. Sam, did you have anything on that question?
Yeah, sure. I feel feel it feels a little light to follow that up, but I mean, I started making Autobio almost exclusively about my family, and I have a relatively good relationship with my family. They're nice people. They're well intentioned. But the comic started out as a strip that I started doing in college, which was just kind of like a mom say the darndest things, like kind of cute, like home family circus style strip. And then as I continued to draw it over the course of the next 10 years, increasingly childhood trauma would kind of slip in, or like tension over like my gender identity, and just like some heavier real world emotions were starting to kind of creep in through the margins. And I've definitely hurt my family's feelings a lot with it, and I try to be sensitive when I write about them. And I mean, I'm aware that I take poetic license, but it's almost impossible not to when you're doing memoir comics. But it's a very delicate tightrope to walk if you're trying to consider the feelings of your subjects, and that's not something that you need to do. It really does depend on who you're writing about, the nature of the relationship, what your priorities are as a storyteller. But it is hard to write about other people. It's a big burden of responsibility, and it freaks me out a lot. I've tried in my more recent like trans-oriented memoir to like try to kind of keep other people out of it and make it more of like an internal reflection thing where I'm kind of the focus. But that brings its own challenges as well. It's hard to tell a story without other people. I don't know if I've quite cracked that code yet.
It seemed like in this example that I noticed you often have like a kind of generic interlocutor or something that you're dealing with, and not necessarily a person, but someone to kind of bounce off of that you've invented. Yeah,
that's kind of been my stopgap solution when I don't want to draw an actual person who has offended me, you know, which I certainly could be doing. Yeah.
So Anne, I wanted to come back to your work. I mean, I've only got Crush up here, but your other works, you're with definitely working in kind of different media, and so I wanted to ask, like, how do you use different media other than comics as part of your autobiography?
Totally. Well, I think to that I would say, like, everything I create is part of my autobiography, right? So recently I've been working more in ceramics and textiles, and that's the stuff, especially the ceramics, which last fucking forever, that's going to be around when I'm not around anymore, right? And that will tell my story in some way of, like, there was a maker who made these objects. It was Anne. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I was noticing, especially like with Squirt, there's pictures, there's photographs in there. There's all these different, and you do a lot with just straight prose. How about using those I guess forms or media?
Totally. So in the issue of Squirt that Andy's talking about, there is a set of mittens I knit that are the front and back covers, and one is like a vulva mitten and one is an asshole mitten. So that's very, very directly merging the zines and the textiles. And then the prose as well, yeah, personal essays. Also work, I think, in the same vein, or in a way that I maybe haven't quite figured out like how to run it all together yet, except for just it's all autobio, right? Comics, essays, thinking about like reaching a different audience or just learning different creative skills for myself, and like what's the best vessel or media for any given story.
Thanks. Kayla, another question for you is, one of the things that fascinates me about your work is that you use old children's comics from like the 50s and so on as the models for your pages and your panels, and then draw your traumatic experiences into them. So what went into making that particular choice for your presentation?
Mm-hmm. I started out doing pen and ink comics. I had this character named Monty and this other character named Whale Girl, and they were both like split self-portrait characters. They were like big and like pen and ink, total opposite of what I'm doing now. And then when I graduated from college, I had to move back into my bio dad's home and take care of my bio mom because she had cancer at the time. And I was just, so much self-loathing. I'm in recovery from alcoholism. I was like, just a mess. And I had all this art. Like I was making all this physical art. And it was just too much of a burden, like to own. It took up too much physical space in the world, and I threw it all away. And the only art I wanted to make from then on, I wanted it to not exist in real life. So I became a digital cartoonist. I give myself so much more grace now than I did at the time. So I'm making three-dimensional objects, but my comics are still entirely digital. I have always been fascinated by mid-century children's comics. They were a safe haven for me as a child. I loved Little Lulu. I loved these like clear binaries of good and evil. Like I loved seeing this plucky little girl win in the end. It gave me a sense of stability and an understanding of the world that was not the world I was in. Clean lines, nice house, like suburbs, like no, it's not what my life looked like. So I think that like obsession visually and like culturally of like just the opposite of what my life looked like I am like taking it and I am like living in it now. And I am subverting it into what life actually is like. Like there is no Leave It to Beaver bullshit, like Little Lulu, like girls don't always win. Like girls get hurt and they're abandoned and they're hungry. So I think that's the conceit of why I really do feel like I am just like, I've moved in to this world of comics that also like in many ways doesn't want me. Like I'm Mexican, I'm a dyke, I'm a Southerner, I'm an alcoholic. Like I don't think in 1952, Mr. Johnny, comics artist, would, he'd probably be rolling in his grave knowing that I am reappropriating his work. And that's something I take great joy in. I love these cartoonists, love the work, but I'm not sure that they would love me nowadays. And I really do love that. So that's why.
So when you say Mr. Johnny, you mean like John Stanley?
Not specifically.
Who didn't like a lot of people, so probably.
I actually don't know anything about John Stanley personally.
Oh yeah.
Just thinking like Johnny in the 50s.
Yeah.
You can just imagine him.
No.
He didn't have a great life.
No.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But that kind of thinking about it, somebody. I don't know. Thinking about this is making me wonder about like the Little Lulu genealogy, like where, like because Howard Cruse had a subscription to Little Lulu when he was a kid, and he got his start drawing comics by tracing Little Lulu or copying Little Lulu comics. And that is there a family tree where we put Little Lulu at the top and we get, we go all the way through to, because if that travels through Howard, then it goes everywhere.
Yeah. I really love that.
So I want to leave some time for questions at the end, but MS, I wanted to ask you about your upcoming project that you've got. If you could talk about that.
Yeah. Next fall, I'll have a book which will be a follow-up to Desperate Pleasures, which is Time Under Tension. I'm almost done with it. It will be done soon. It has the same characters. It's a lot slower. I would say maybe like the most of me is in this book as compared to my other books, where there's more panels per page. I'm moving on more of like a 9 to 12 grid instead of like a more cinematic like 6 or 4 or 3. So more pages, more space. It's a lot quieter. It just feels a lot more mature in terms of just like being able to kind of handle this information. Like a similar kind of like similar story in the sense of like it's like this ongoing thing, but it's just a better take on talking about the things I'm talking about. So yeah.
Is it coming out from Uncivilized also?
It's coming out from Fantagraphics.
Fantagraphics,
So,
great.
So yeah, I talked to Gary about ice cream for like 20 minutes today, Gary Groth, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, we'll publish that. We'll figure it out." I was like, Eric's my contact for that, so I'm just like, Gary's just the ice cream man in my life.
Do you know, like when you're talking about doing more panels per page and stuff, is it going to then have a different kind of trim size than?
I like that size of that book.
Yeah.
It's just like this little fat little guy. So it's the same. It's Desperate Pleasures. So
It's good for traveling. I like having this like.
well, that's the point. It's like all these publishers want me to do hardcover, and I feel like the point is to have a little floppy thing that can just be like readily bent and abused, and it's not a big deal. So.
And Sam, we've talked a bit. Is your upcoming book? Is this the?
Yeah, that's the first chapter of the book. I kind of put it in as a backdoor pilot when I was pitching the book.
And that's in Girl Health 3, is it?
Yeah, Girl Health 3, my latest autobio zine. It's a color insert printed by Matt Davis of Perfectly Acceptable. The printing is really good, but I messed up the colors because I did it RGB separation instead of the CMYK separation. But yeah, the book's coming out soon. As I've kind of been working on comics, I've kind of had like a thread of memoir stuff and like a thread of like jokier gag stuff when I want to kind of like approach the trans stuff. We're more of a place of like levity and irreverence, and like this book is going to attempt to like literally cross those streams together and have kind of like my gag avatar interact with my autobio avatar and like kind of like bring these two ideas together of like the sort of like surrealist jokey side of my work and the more like grounded pathosy sad sack memoir self.
Do you have like a base of readers that have been following you through all these different projects?
A very small one. This guy and I actually were part of a zine distro together in college.
Oh, wow.
And are seeing each other for the first time in like 10 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, yeah, you're one of the day ones.
Really sweet.
I'm not a day one, but I like Sam's work too.
Yeah. You're on the list.
What was the distro called?
It was called the Oberlin Comics Collective. We got the school to buy us a risograph and printed anthologies of student work for a few years. It was a really cool experience. That's how I kind of got on my feet as a cartoonist. And Yeah, Anne was really one of the people that took over when I graduated, and you kept our baby alive. Yeah.
We have 2 Rizos now.
We have 2 Rizos now?
Yeah. They're named Frog and Toad.
Are you shitting me? No one told me this. That's so cute. It's okay.
So
Yeah, I love that.
Has that been then like a tradition now? Did you pass it on to somebody else?
Yeah, I passed it on to some more students when I graduated. It's been a few years now since that time, but hopefully they're still doing their thing.
Huh. That's interesting. Because that reminds me of what Trung Lewin said the other day about I think this was on Thursday, which seems like Friday, which seems like ages ago, that when people asked him how to network, he talked about networking horizontally rather than networking vertically, and that is get with a cohort of people basically that's kind of got the same interest and grow with all of them, and that sounds exactly what this Oberlin Collective was like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, yeah. That was like a really inspiring experience. And Matt Davis, the co-founder, went on to create Perfectly Acceptable, which is, one of the all-time great risographers of our generation. It was an honor to watch him cook. Yeah.
And what do you have in the coming out in the back burner?
Yeah, nothing from any famous publisher you would know, but I just started a new series that's going to be following my experiences through the Jewish holidays for a whole year.
Oh, yeah.
It was just the New Year, Shana Tova, to all who celebrate. And yeah, so that's a very fresh series, but just if you don't know, there's a lot of Jewish holidays, and I think I don't even know all of them. So I'm gonna try to get more grounded with that and write about it.
Yeah, my university just had to come up with a new absence policy because some asshole professor would not let Jewish students miss class for the holidays, and I was like, can't we just everybody has.
Sure, that ended well.
And Kayla, yours is coming out 2024, Precious Rubbish from
That's right.
Fantagraphics.
Yes, I know it's a bit difficult to say. It's a silencing title in many ways. Yes, 2024 from Fantagraphics, edited by ever kind and gentle and supportive Eric Reynolds. It is a collection of work that I've made over the course of a decade, like I said. But it's expanded into, I think it's going on to about 250 pages or so. There are it's 2 books in one. One is much smaller and one is like the comics, but there'll be 2 different covers. The working title for the second book is How to Read Kayla. And I got permission from, actually Mark Newgarden suggested that title for me, and I was like, sure, bro? He was like, yes, take it. So yeah, it's gonna have critical essays about the book and my practice, and an interview with Mark Newgarden, John Kelly, and myself that we're actively working on right now. So yeah, it's gonna be a bit of a tome and my introduction as a cartoonist. It'll be the first real thing I've ever published.
So that's going to be supplementary material to Precious Rubbish,
The book itself?
the what you were calling about the How to Read Kayla, is that
Supplementary material, yes.
Is that going to be in Precious Rubbish or a
It
separate?
is. It's
okay.
so it's the double-sided thing
Yeah.
where you flip it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's the
cool.
concept I'm working with. Don't hold me to it, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's going to be.
That feels like one of those teaching English, like a Norton Critical edition of Precious Rubbish
Yeah.
coming out before it,
Yeah.
and that will make it super teachable. That's going
It
to be
will.
exciting.
That is something that I really wanted to think about. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, and let's open up. We got 10 minutes or so. Actually, today's this is the last panel, so we can go to the wee hours of the morning if y'all want. But let's go ahead with questions, and I'll repeat the question. I think I'm supposed to do that, right?
Hey, so how has doing Autobio Comics then changed your perceptions or relationships with yourself outside of that?
Okay, yeah, so the question is how have doing autobio comics changed your perceptions of yourself?
Can I say something really quick? Yeah, that's such a good question and really, really resonates with me. So one of the great benefits of making this work is that, as a survivor of basically every type of fucking trauma that you can imagine my body has endured, I gaslight myself so much. And I'll like tell myself it wasn't that bad or it didn't happen. And like one of the problems with having gaps in my memory is that like it makes my brain like it makes it easy for me to minimize things because like anyway. So I make this work when I'm in like a PTSD flare up, you know, like I'm already like fucked. So then I'll like the door's open, I'll walk inside, I'll make the work. And I know that eventually I won't believe myself. So I go back to my work and I read it. And it's like, holy shit, yes, that did happen to me. Yes, I believe you, Kayla. Yes, okay, it's real. And like in that way, it has like, I do not find making these comics therapeutic. Like I'm so jealous when other memoir comics cartoonists say that because like I really wish it felt good to make this work. But that is the way that it gives a gift to myself and has provided like real, tangible, serious healing in my trauma recovery.
Others want to take a shot at that question?
Can you repeat it?
Go ahead.
Yeah, how has making autobio comics changed your perception or relationship with yourself?
I think this is more of like an earlier on thing for me, like when I was starting to make comics and just generally, I mean, like I was making comics about like trying to have sex at the airport and like with like people I'd meet in the security line and like you know, going to house parties in college and like just starting to pro wrestle people without telling the people that own the house. It's just like stupid bullshit that just like gets you in trouble. So like a good rule for me who needed boundaries was like, don't do it for the comic. Like if a stupid situation presents itself, like if somebody online is like, I'll give you $3,000 to meet me at like 4 a.m. in this hotel room, like don't do that even though the comic might be cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so that was a good one early on. That was a good takeaway.
It's actually, it seems like a common lesson in for people who do autobio comics, especially diary comics, is don't try to make your day like interesting because you don't have anything to do.
Yeah,
I
had only just recently got that. Did anyone else kickstart that Birdcage Bottom Kickstarter? Where I got that Brother Malcolm comic, and that's maybe the first time I read a daily that I've been like, oh, now I want to make dailies. I've never made a daily and been like, I want to tell people what's going on in my day to day, because for so often than not, it was crazy bullshit that was like not good to put out there. So, yeah.
Yeah, Sam, did you want to hit that one?
Yeah, totally. I mean, well, first of all, I mean, it is like a way to kind of like indirectly address stuff you're maybe avoiding in your brain. Like after I came out of the closet, I like looked and there were like a lot of hints about the gender stuff I was struggling with that I didn't even notice when I was writing that seemed very obvious in retrospect. But also just to jump on what what MS is saying. Sorry, dude. To jump on what MS is saying, I think it does sort of make you a main character in your own life, for better or for worse. And sometimes when I'm having a bad experience in my life, it can be kind of comforting and give me some remove from it to imagine myself as a character moving their way through a story. At the same time, that can also have a dark side to it where it does sort of draw you to bad situations because they're like dramatically compelling, and it can also like cause you to lose sight of empathy for other people. So I think there is a little bit of a danger to just sort of fully escaping into becoming a character, but it is a nice way to just sort of make sense of your life and to keep it from getting too real sometimes.
Yeah. Sydney, you had a question?
Yeah, I did have a question. I want to know more about how you all came up with titles for your comics.
good question. And so how did you all come up with titles for your comics? Desperate Pleasures is one I really like in particular.
It takes a while. I was mad when this book came out because I think a week after it did, some band wrote a song called this, and then that's the Google search result now. Fucking pissed me off. Tinderella, somebody said to me in a car, I think on the way to Milwaukee Zine Fest, and that I was like, Noah, who are you talking to? And they were like, yeah, some Tinderella, and I was like, yo, that's mine now. But I guess that's a play or something. That's it's not. I didn't invent it in that. Other properties exist with that. Time Under Tension is exercise terminology. So that book is about me like kind of getting my shit together and becoming a personal trainer. And so like it refers to like the point, like the tempo of like an exercise, like the beat of it. So some exercises utilize different counts, and I mean I feel like I've been lauded on my ability to pace work, whether it's breakneck or like blunt and really loud and aggressive. But like this whole book is a lot slower, so I kind of wanted to call attention to that with that. So you make a graphic novel for fucking ever, and you sit there and agonize over titles, and something eventually should emerge.
I think you all have got really perfect titles for your works. I mean, Crush kind of like has such great like multiple levels of meaning for that story, and and Squirt is the perfect title for a queer erotic book.
Momics is my favorite though.
Yeah.
Portmanteau.
Such a good title.
Yeah. Comics Will Break Your Balls is a good title too.
Thank you.
How about Precious Rubbish?
Yeah, I stole the title from Theodore Shaw. I don't know if anyone is familiar with this obscure mid-century absurdist writer who writes about art criticism and just like destroys art criticism. He's amazing. I highly recommend looking up Theodore Shaw and reading Precious Rubbish. It's a little bit dense, but it's a wild, fun ride. So I'm a big Theodore Shaw fan, but also the title to me is just like such a perfect home for my practice. It's the way that I think about my life, like really valuable garbage. And also the one of the writers who's contributing to like the back matter portion of my book is R.L. Goldberg, who's like a genius. But so they wrote like specifically about the title and wrote about how I mentioned earlier that precious rubbish is silencing, and how like when you say it, there are all of these like shh in it. Like it's not like this like alliterative, like playful thing like Little Lulu. Like precious rubbish like shuts it down. It quiets. And so it just is like a really like valuable combination of words for me that is, I don't know what else my work could be called. It was like during my bottom of my addiction, I was like just like consuming a lot of Theodore Shaw, and even before I was making these comics, I was just like, this is a title, So I earmarked it, and I was able to use it when the time came.
Great. Well, we're actually a little past 4 o'clock, so I'm sure we can have questions for the panelists, but I'll suggest also, if you haven't hit their tables, go grab this stuff from them. I hope this gave also a good preview of what their work is like. And I spent 2 years writing a book about autobiographical comics and thought I never wanted to read another one again. And I would have to say I really, really loved all your work. And so I was really excited to be a part of this panel. So thank you for your work, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm table 55. I have a lot of comics left. Come find me.